Hello everyone, my name is Cindy Hughes. I'm the Polk County Advocate Supervisor here at CASA. I have a very wonderful guest with us today. This is Marilyn Sanders from the River Valley Child Advocacy Center. She's here to talk about the CAC, sorry, and a little bit about mandatory reporting. She did a wonderful training for us a couple weeks ago, and unfortunately, some of you missed it, so we'd like to give you a brief summary of what we went over on that. Marilyn, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Marilyn Sanders. I'm the Executive Director of the River Valley Child Advocacy Center. Our center covers Pope, Johnson, and Yale and helps with Logan. And so we've been here since 2017, and then we started offering services to families in 2018.
Oh, very cool. How does someone become a mandatory reporter?
So the law already sets that up as to who is a mandated reporter, and the list is extensive, and pretty much anybody who has contact with children is going to be a mandated reporter, from your schools to your doctor's offices to dentists to child care facilities to people who work at the Boys and Girls Club. Anybody who has contact with children really are mandated reporters.
Oh, cool. And how do they know when to report?
So the reporting process is that if you have a suspicion that something is going on, you don't have to know for it to necessarily be fact. You're not to do the investigation, but if you have a reasonable cause to report, then you are mandated by law to report. And no supervisor, no person of authority can stop you from doing that. So say like a school teacher a principal cannot stop a teacher from making a report. They don't have to tell them by law that they made that report. Or like if a nurse, they don't have to notify the doctor if they, are concerned. A CASA volunteer does not have to notify or get permission from a supervisor to make a report of child abuse. What we do encourage is that you let supervisors know and your boss know, so that way they are aware of what's going on. But like I said, no one by law can stop you from making a report, because if something happens and it is found that you knew about it, you're a mandated reporter, you knew what was going on and did not report it, then you can lose your license, you can be fined, you can go to jail. There are repercussions for mandated reporters if they don't report. And so we always encourage people to do just by caution. It's better to be safe than sorry. And if you call into the hotline and it's not accepted, you've done your due diligence. And so even if you call sometimes and it may not fit the Child Maltreatment Act for definition of child abuse, because there's things that you may know, but you might not have enough information at that point to make that call. But that's okay, because you've done your part. You may gather more information as time goes by. You can call back to the hotline and tell them, I have more information now, and then you can give them more information. So it's okay if you don't have all of the information right off the bat, but you do need certain things, such as where can the child be found? You might not have an exact address, but do you have directions? Do you know what school the child attends? Something that they can locate that child. And then, of course, who the guardians are. Do they live with grandma? Do they live with, the mom and dad? Who do they live with? And then, what is the age of the child? A birth date is great. And they're going to ask you on the hotline, like socials and things like that, but you don't have to know all that stuff. And you just tell the hotline worker, I don't have that information, and that's okay. But they have a script of questions that they want to ask, and to make sure that they gather as much information as possible. And so they will ask, like the child's age, they'll ask the child's race, they'll ask where the child lives, if the child goes to school. They're going to want to know who knows about this. this. So if you've talked to your CASA supervisor and you've told the CASA supervisor, that's somebody to tell them that, well, I've told my CASA supervisor, and what their name is. And then, of course, who all lives in the house is very important. Are there more than one kid in the home? How many kids are in that home can help. How many kids need to be interviewed? How many kids are going to need services? And then, of course, the most important thing, who is the alleged offender? And again, we very rarely know, a lot of times, the birth date or age of the alleged offender, and that's okay, unless it's a child, because if the child is the alleged offender, then that will dictate who gets the investigation, whether it's the Arkansas State Police Crimes Against Children's Division or whether it's going to be DCFS. Because if it's a young child acting out on another child, it's going to go to DCFS. If it is a teenager and up, then it's going to go to the Crimes Against Children's Division. But other than that, we really don't have to have the age of the alleged offender right off the bat. And then, of course, we get a lot of unknown offenders. And so even if you know a first name and an unknown last name, that's okay as well. And so just as much information as you do have, but just the minimum so a child can be found. And we have a basis of why is this being reported and what are the allegations to it. The other important thing in making reports to the hotline is using the child's words. If a child calls a body part something that we might not call a body part, because unfortunately a lot of parents do not teach their children the exact words for body parts, and they use silly names and monkey and things like that. And so use whatever words that child uses, because that helps that credibility with that child. If that child calls their private parts a certain name, don't use the word when you call it into the hotline. Don't use what word you would use or the technical word. Use their language, because then when that child is being interviewed and that child then uses that same language, that leads credibility that they're being consistent with their statement. And even though we know that when we have a traumatic event that happens to us, when we retell it to certain people, sometimes things change, or we think of something else, we add something else. And so it's real important that what you say to the hotline and what gets reported and what's put on that report, and then if that child says the same thing, that leads credibility. And so we want to make sure in the interviews with children that we're giving them the chance to be as credible as possible. And so the reporter plays a big part in that, in making sure that we have the information that they gave and that gets translated, because it's kind of like playing the telephone game. Mm-hmm. If I tell you one thing and you tell somebody else, by the time it gets around, the story has changed. And so that's another reason with reporters that the person that has the direct knowledge be the one to make the report. Another reason why supervisors and employers cannot mandate someone to tell them what happened to make the report. It needs to come from that person that knows the information directly or was told the information directly, so we make sure that we don't have that problem.
Oh, very interesting. Now, say someone that makes a report and there's no findings, is there any consequences to that?
To the reporter?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because there's a lot of times that cases are found untrue, but it doesn't mean it didn't happen, because they have law enforcement, your prosecutor's office, your DHS, and your Crimes Against Children's Division. Their burden of proof is all different. And so whereas we may know in our hearts that something happened and we know something has happened to that child, that it might not meet the definition. We might not have just enough information for them to be able to find it true. Because a lot of times, especially with sexual abuse, it is one person's word against another. And so that's why, again, we want that child to be as credible as possible so it can be found true. But again, there are times that we know something happened and we know what happened was not appropriate and was not good and probably could have been a grooming issue where nothing's happened yet. We know something happened, but it's not enough to find it true and or for someone to be arrested. A report can be found true with the Department of Human Services or with the Crimes Against Children's Division, but it doesn't mean somebody's going to get arrested, because the law enforcement's burden of proof is even greater than the burden of proof that Crimes Against Children's have to have. And then somebody might be arrested, but that doesn't mean that that person's going to be tried in court, in a court of law, because again, does it meet that burden of proof for them to take it to court to put it before a jury?
Oh, very interesting. So what is going on at the CAC?
So at the Child Advocacy Center, we have five different parts of service. The first is advocates, where we have advocates that work with the families, that provide services, referrals, whatever that family needs. And then we do the forensic interviews, which is where a child is interviewed one time, so they don't have to tell their story over and over and over. And yes, and so that way, if say law enforcement is not there on the day of the interview, and then it does turn into something that needs to be, reviewed by law enforcement, they can then view the taped recording of that interview. They do not have to go and interview that child. Also, by interviewing children at the Child Advocacy Center, they're not being interviewed at the police station where they think they might be in trouble, at school where everybody knows you get called to the office, or in the house where the abuse may have occurred. So the CAC is a neutral setting for that to happen. And then also, we offer the trauma-focused therapy, which is therapy guided towards helping somebody overcome that trauma. Because if you talk to adult survivors of sexual abuse, they'll tell you that, it has affected their adult life, and we want to stop that. And then we have the medical exams, where we do the sexual assault exams for children, because if you send a child to the emergency room or the doctor, they're going to get an adult exam. We have specialized equipment called a colposcope that can magnify things that the naked eye can't see. And then we are also connected by telemed to Children's Hospital, so they can see everything that we see, for also confirmation of what the nurse may or may not see, and do the STI testing, pregnancy testing, and referrals for other medical services if that's necessary. And then we also do prevention and education out in the field to schools, mandated reporter training, anything that we can do to educate the community on reporting abuse and stopping it. And so, so with those, we've been, like I said, we've been in operation now, offering services for right at 5 years. And so we have seen over 1,700 children in Pope Johnson and Yale, and part of Logan as well, that we've served that many children in that time frame. In 2017, only 37 children got services out of CAC. And so that means all those children were being interviewed at other places. They weren't getting the services that they always needed. And so we knew that this area needed one, because they were assigned to other centers in the state, but the services weren't happening due to travel. And so by putting the CAC here, my goal was 100. If we saw 100 kids in that first year, I'd have felt like we made a good station to put one here. And then the first 9 months we saw 174, and now we're at over 1,700 kids. So that just shows that it was something that people don't know happens. People don't know that what goes on. And so the more that we can educate people on that it's here, it's there, is very important to us to make sure that happens.
If someone wanted to get in contact with you, how would they do that?
They can email me at Marilyn, MARILYN, at rivervalleycac.org, or our office number is 479-498-4747.
Okay, well, Marilyn, I really appreciate you taking the time to come out and do Coffee with CASA with us. If you have any questions, just get a hold of Marilyn, and she is fantastic and will tell you anything that you need to know. And we're going to wrap it up, and y'all have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.